Once upon a time, a very simple boy named Mahiro was on his way home and met a black cat, so he decided to take it and raise it, and he named it Kuro. The next day Mahiro went to school, and the teacher was assigning the students tasks for the school festival, and she said they still needed to choose the person responsible for the festival costumes. But the students objected because no one knew how to sew, so a boy named Sakuya suggested that Mahiro be responsible for the costumes. His friend told him that they had already chosen Mahiro for food, but Sakuya replied that he was the best at housework. Suddenly Mahiro entered. They told him about the problem and that they lacked someone to handle the costumes, so he said he would accept the task. On their way home, his friend Koyuki asked him if he could handle all these tasks alone and why he always took on the jobs no one wanted. Mahiro answered because someone had to do them. Sakuya asked if he didn't need help from his childhood friend, but Mahiro replied sarcastically that Sakuya would tire him out more than help. He said he wanted to be the person who always saved others. They reached the place where they would separate, and Sakuya told him to be careful because vampires had appeared at the station. As usual, no one believed him and ignored him, so he kept talking and said bite marks were appearing on people. When they finally believed him, he asked how many lies he had just told, so Koyuki hit him on the head and said that was expected of him. Mahiro continued on his way home. When he arrived, he noticed the TV was on. Suddenly, he found a young man sitting in his room eating and watching TV, so Mahiro screamed at him asking how he entered someone's house without permission. He grabbed a broom and tried to hit him, but the young man dodged easily. Mahiro fell and accidentally opened the curtain, letting sunlight in, and the young man turned into the black cat. When Mahiro closed the curtain again, he turned back into a human. The young man asked Mahiro what he was doing, saying he didn't live in sunlight. Mahiro asked what exactly he was, and the young man replied simply that he was just a trapped, kind vampire who didn't hurt anyone. Mahiro got scared and asked if he was the killer at the station. The young man said he was too lazy for that and that it wasn't easy and was basically a crime. Then he asked for tea and said he would leave at night but told Mahiro not to say his name while he was human. Mahiro replied that he didn't even know his name, that he had just found a cat and named it Kuro. Suddenly a blue light appeared under them, forming a lock on Mahiro's hand and Kuro's neck before disappearing. Kuro told Mahiro he was very stupid. Mahiro got angry and demanded an explanation. Kuro said he was a servamp, a type of vampire that serves its master and follows orders when drinking their blood. Mahiro asked if what happened meant a contract between them, and Kuro said it was temporary and would break if he didn't drink Mahiro's blood within 24 hours. Suddenly Mahiro picked Kuro up and threw him outside, but as soon as he entered the house, the blue light pulled Kuro back in. Kuro laughed and said they couldn't be separated. Mahiro hit him, and Kuro objected, asking how he could hurt a pet and where his family was. Mahiro sadly said they died in an accident and that his relatives didn't know what to do with him, but his uncle decided to take care of him, otherwise, he might have ended up on the street. Suddenly Mahiro remembered he was going to meet Ryusei and Koyuki. He grabbed Kuro and left. As soon as he closed the door, he heard breaking sounds but ignored them and continued. When he met his friends, he told them what happened, but they didn't believe him and said he was exhausted from too many tasks and needed rest. He asked Kuro to turn human to prove it, but Kuro ignored him. Suddenly a clown named Belkia appeared and asked if they wanted a show. He pulled 3 swords from his hat, catching everyone's attention, but Ryusei said he wasn't interested and wanted to leave. The clown blocked him, asking everyone why he stopped him. Was it because Ryusei ignored him because he was hungry, or because Ryusei was rude? Suddenly he bit Ryusei and screamed that the answer was all of the above and he would kill anyone who ignored him. People got scared and ran everywhere. The clown shouted that vampires always affected people more than clowns and magicians. Mahiro asked who he was and if he was a friend of Kuro. Belkia replied the opposite. He hated the stupid black cat and would kill Mahiro if he tried to protect him. Suddenly Kuro appeared, grabbed Mahiro, and said they had to run. But Mahiro refused, saying Kuro was the only one who could stop him since he was also a vampire. If no one tried to stop Belkia, people would die. Someone had to act. Kuro said he couldn't do anything and had no special power and that everyone always said someone had to act, so he would say it too. Mahiro told him to run alone but that he wouldn't escape and returned to the scene. When he got there, he attacked Belkia and tried to choke him, thinking he had to step in because everyone ran since it was easier, but without someone stepping in the world couldn't go on. He had to be that person. Belkia screamed, asking if he was trying to steal the spotlight and saying he would kill him. Belkia raised his sword and aimed at Mahiro, but Kuro intervened and saved him, saying people like Mahiro loved trouble. Kuro admitted he couldn't do anything because he hadn't drunk blood in years, then pulled the sword from his own chest. Mahiro said he knew he wasn't a savior and neither was Kuro, but together they could be that person. He offered his hand and ordered Kuro to drink his blood. The blue light appeared again, and a permanent contract formed between them. Belkia laughed and told Kuro that now he was his master's servant. He pulled his sword and attacked, but Mahiro ordered Kuro to fight the vampire. Kuro said he didn't want to face him but had to follow orders and wasn't responsible for his actions. He attacked the vampire and knocked him down but was about to kill him. Mahiro told him to stop, but Kuro ignored him, so Mahiro grabbed him by the neck and reminded him that since he was responsible, Kuro had to listen. Kuro obeyed. Belkia put on his hat and turned into a small doll. Mahiro asked why he attacked Kuro, and Belkia said his master Tsubaki ordered him to kill Kuro. Kuro said he didn't know anyone named Tsubaki. Belkia replied that no one knew Tsubaki because everyone forgot him, and that's why he chose to kill anyone who didn't know him. Kuro fell and told Mahiro he wasn't okay and would get infections because of him. Mahiro asked what infections when Kuro was a vampire, then Mahiro lost consciousness. Mahiro woke up the next day in his room and said maybe all of this was a dream. He ran to the black cat and found it sleeping and talking in its sleep, so he he was sure it wasn't a dream. He got scared and rushed to school, and as soon as he entered, he asked Sakuya about Ryusei. Sakuya looked at him sadly. Then he heard Ryusei's voice coming, so Mahiru hit Sakuya and called him useless. Mahiru asked Ryusei about his neck now, and Ryusei said he was much better, that it was just a small accident and the car driver managed to avoid killing him. Mahiru got angry and said, "What accident? A vampire attacked and bit you." Koyuki told Mahiru to stop acting like Sakuya and focus on the festival. Mahiru walked back home talking to himself, saying he had prepared everything and he and the vampire were there, so someone must be hiding evidence and truth. He couldn't understand what was happening and yelled at Kuro in his bag not to move. He opened the bag and found Belkia the doll saying he was hungry and wanted to drink his blood. Mahiru told him to shut up and asked how he got there. People looked at Mahiru like he was crazy for talking to the doll. Mahiru continued walking and asked Kuro who Tsubaki was. Kuro, sitting on his shoulder as a black cat, said definitely someone mentally unstable who wanted to kill a cute cat like him. Mahiru got angry and said he was a vampire not a cat. If they thought a little, Tsubaki was their enemy and they had to deal with him. Suddenly the noon sky started raining and turned red. A person appeared from nowhere and told Mahiru to tell him an exciting story or an adventure he had. A news voice appeared saying the boy adopted a small black cat and discovered it was a vampire and used it to defeat another vampire. Kuro told Mahiru they were in trouble and needed to run. Suddenly the man laughed loudly, said the story wasn't exciting at all, grabbed Mahiru's bag and took the doll. The doll spoke and thanked Tsubaki for saving it. Mahiru asked if this crazy man was Tsubaki, and Tsubaki said yes, he was the one who tried to kill Mahiru last night and still wanted to kill more humans and vampires. He asked if Mahiru had a problem with that. Suddenly he targeted Kuro, grabbed him and threw him on the ground. Then he asked Kuro for an exciting story or to fight. Mahiru asked in shock if Kuro was his brother. Kuro said he must be mistaken because he didn't know him. Tsubaki laughed again and asked Mahiru why no one knew him. He asked Mahiru if he knew how many servant vampires there were. Mahiru looked confused, so Kuro answered 7. Tsubaki continued and introduced them. The lazy sleepy Ash whom Mahiru called Kuro, the proud child, the envious Jeej, the angry mother, the gluttonous Gret, the greedy Lawless, and finally the arrogant old Love. But there was an 8th one, himself, the servant of melancholy. He turned into a small fox and laughed madly. Mahiru asked why he killed people. Tsubaki answered what was the problem, he didn't like humans. He reminded Mahiru that he attacked his vampire yesterday because he didn't like him. Then he said, did Mahiru know how many died last night in the city? No, and it didn't matter how many he killed. Mahiru got angry and asked why he killed innocent people. Tsubaki said everyone claimed innocence. He attacked Kuro, calling him Sleepy Ash, and pulled his sword saying the 7 forgot or tried to forget, but he hadn't forgotten what happened. He told Kuro to summon the 7 servamps and fight. He attacked Mahiru, but Kuro defended him and was weaker than Tsubaki. Mahiru ordered Kuro to drink his blood, but Kuro refused, saying he couldn't because of the infections. Tsubaki managed to knock Kuro down. Mahiru yelled at Tsubaki, asking why he was fighting, and Tsubaki said simply because it was fun, no one could understand him, and that's why he would kill them. Mahiru remembered losing his family and how he used to think no one would understand him. He remembered his friends trying to cheer him while he ran from them and how he cried when he returned home. But he remembered his uncle always said if you don't know your own feelings, you won't know what others try to make you feel. Face your feelings to understand people. Mahiru told Tsubaki nothing satisfied him because he didn't face his feelings. He felt misunderstood because he didn't face himself or show others his emotions. Tsubaki hit him, laughed, and said he faced people by killing them. That was his way to communicate. Mahiru said he would stop him and had his own ways. He said if he called a servant by name and gave his blood, the servant would obey. Mahiru attacked saying he would name him, drink his blood, and make him his servant. Tsubaki said he would kill him first. Kuro grabbed Mahiru and they disappeared from the place. Mahiru woke and asked Kuro what happened. Kuro said a servant saved them. Mahiru asked if another servant besides Kuro. 2 girls appeared and said old Love was summoning them to come. Kuro said he was tired and couldn't. Then a man with a car arrived, saying they had to come, and they got in. Mahiru asked the man if he was old Love. He said no, his name was Misono, and he was the Eve of the arrogant servant old Love. Mahiru asked what Eve meant. Misono said it was the title of a servant's master. Mahiru realized that meant he and Kuro were also Eve and master and that Tsubaki had an Eve too. When they arrived, the 2 girls brought a chair for Misono. Mahiru asked why he didn't walk. Old Love said because his health was weak. Misono got mad and told him not to stand over him again. They saw old Love as a very beautiful butterfly. They entered the house, and Misono told Mahiru he had interfered in his battle with the vampire. Mahiru thanked him and said he was happy to finally meet an ally. Misono replied that he wasn't kind and that Mahiru hadn't heard their demands yet. Suddenly the doors closed. Misono angrily told Mahiru he didn't know how to use his servant and had to become his servant and obey him with no refusal allowed. Suddenly old Love attacked and wished to end the argument peacefully. Mahiru said it wasn't a discussion if one-sided and asked to be heard first. Misono arrogantly told him he was slow to understand and hated ordinary people, so there was no discussion. Mahiru got angry and said he didn't know Misono or his wealth, but how could he be so arrogant? Surely anyone would refuse such orders. He told Kuro they had to leave and pulled him, broke the door, and thought how he could have believed they were allies. Once outside, he didn't find a gate but saw many children watching from the windows. He asked who they were. Old Love answered that those children were lower-level vampires created by servamps and that Tsubaki killed many of them. Misono interrupted and said he didn't want to sit on a throne protected by everyone, that's why he wanted power. He asked Mahiru why he needed power. power and if he was ready to sit on the Eve throne and help everyone. Mahiru said Misono didn't have to protect all the children alone and that he would help him but as a friend. Misono said if Mahiru didn't want to be his servant, that was fine, but Mahiru had no weapon and asked how he would face vampires and that he could teach him to use his weapon. Mahiru and Kuro left the house. At night Mahiru went shopping with Sakuya. Sakuya gave Mahiru a bracelet to replace the one he lost, and they decided to walk under the rain. Suddenly Mahiru heard someone following him and turned. Sakuya asked if he felt the vampires the rumors mentioned. Mahiru asked if Sakuya had encountered any and said to tell him so he could help. Sakuya said he didn't know what Mahiru was talking about but that Mahiru had been acting strangely lately and asked if he was hiding something. Mahiru got nervous and said everything was fine and not to worry. They separated. And the next day, Mahiru and Kuro head to Misono's house, who receives them and scolds Kuro, telling him how could you not tell your Eve about the weapon matter. So Kuro says we shouldn't care about such things. So they shout at him and Mahiru tells Misono he knows nothing about vampires, but he wants to protect people, especially his friends. He doesn't want to regret not protecting them. So Kuro lazily asks are you sure you need the weapon? So Mahiru replies angrily if it will help me then. Of course I'll need it. So Kuro says fine, close your eyes, and leads him into his consciousness. And there he meets a part of Kuro's personality in the form of a small monster that handles power and offers him many gifts, telling him choose one, you won't be able to change it, so be careful. Mahiru chooses the simplest gift and discovers it is a broom, and they return to reality, and Kuro tells him the first time you saw me you attacked me with a broom too. Are cleaning tools weapons to you? And the weapon mark appears on Mahiru's hand, so he covers it with Sakuya's bracelet. In a restaurant we find Tsubaki and the vampire Belkia eating, and Belkia tells Tsubaki hasn't the liar come yet. Suddenly Sakuya enters the restaurant carrying a corpse in his hand, people panic and flee, and Sakuya says to Tsubaki what do you want from me, and why is that person chasing me? So Tsubaki says aren't you afraid someone at school will find out you are a vampire? And Sakuya says no, it doesn't matter to me, especially the liars among them. Meanwhile Mahiru is trying to use his power and we find he cannot summon it at all, so he asks Kuro what exactly should I do? So Kuro says I don't know, learn and summon me. Then Old Love says think about the reason you want power for. So Mahiru says he wants to protect people, especially his friends, because they are family to him after losing his family. So Misono says don't drag your friends into trouble, and Mahiru answers that this is his goal and he can do it, and he addresses Kuro and says you too, right? So Kuro says I will only follow orders. And at 9 o'clock Misono sleeps and leaves them, so Mahiru decides to continue another day. The next day at school Sakuya doesn't come, so Mahiru worries about him and angrily tells himself he was absent after I stayed up all night making his festival suit. I must visit him at his home. On the way to Sakuya's house he tells Kuro about him and says Sakuya always tried to help me and his parents are dead too, but he forgets how they died and forgets where his house is and forgets why he is his friend, and suddenly he asks who is Sakuya I'm talking about. Sakuya appears behind him and says what are you doing? So he replies why are you the one who is absent? I was worried about you. So Sakuya says remember when we parted the last time we met a vampire attacked me, and as usual the moment Mahiru believes him Sakuya asks how many lies did I just tell? So Mahiru hits him, laughs, and says I brought you the food you like. Suddenly they hear a scream, so Sakuya grabs Mahiru and says we have to run. So Mahiru asks why, and he says trust me, I'm your friend and I will never betray you, and they enter an abandoned place. And Sakuya says surely you trust me, and if you trust me why did you lie to me? During the time you have known me how many times did you lie to me? And suddenly threads appear and bind Mahiru and Kuro. And Sakuya laughs sadly and says I warned you many times about vampires, I tried a lot with you. And asks are you sure I even existed? Am I your childhood friend? How many lies are there in your memories? Mahiru tries to recall any memory of Sakuya from his childhood but cannot. So Mahiru says the only lie is that you are a vampire. And Sakuya says humans always like to believe what makes them feel happy. And Sakuya cries and tells him if you hadn't taken in the black cat and if you hadn't lied to me we would have remained friends forever. So Mahiru says he's afraid trouble will reach them and wants to protect them. And Sakuya tells him shut up, you don't trust me, and you're lying to me again. The people I hate most are liars, I can't trust you anymore, you lied to me and I pretended to believe you, does that mean I'm also a liar? And he breaks down. Mahiru thinks how he can stop him, and tells Kuro drink my blood and attack him. So Kuro replies I can't because you are a person without resolve, a servant feeds on resolve mixed with blood, and your goal was to protect your friends and now your friends are the enemies. Suddenly Misono and Old Love enter and attack Sakuya, but Mahiru tells them Sakuya is his friend, don't kill him, yet they ignore him, and Old Love attacks Belkia who has been watching from the beginning, and Misono attacks Sakuya. So Sakuya tells Misono don't be conceited, you're just a spoiled rich Eve. And Misono asks since when did you get close to Mahiru and why? And Sakuya says why do you care to know? Misono answers because he is my friend. So Sakuya gets angry and says you believe that lie, you, the spoiled arrogant rich kid, have friends, and asks will you be able to face me without your servant? Misono turns to Sakuya and tells him Mahiru insisted that you be the first person he introduced me to. So Sakuya asks innocently so Mahiru thought of me, I wished our friendship would last another week and we'd spend the festival together. But you and I, Misono, were friends. Are you and Mahiru truly friends? Misono loses his temper, breaks down, and cannot control himself or his power, and Belkia moves by threads coming from a hidden girl. So Belkia attacks Old Love and cuts off his leg. Mahiru screams at Sakuya and asks why he is doing this. So Sakuya says you still don't understand. We vampires were made for killing and carrying out orders. Killing people and feeling guilt is very beautiful. And now try to fight me seriously or I will kill your friend Misono. And behind Sakuya the spirit of his dead dead sister appears and tells him you are a liar because you won't be able to do the thing that trapped you in sorrow. So Sakuya turns around looking for her, and Kuro tells Mahiro we must run, you cannot fight him at your level, but Mahiro objects and says I won't run and I'll kill him, and Mahiro throws Sakuya's bracelet and summons the broom. Sakuya tells him that's what I was waiting for from you, and Tsubaki appears on a distant building and says to himself finally I'll see him in despair, will he be able to become the key? Mahiro is overcome by anger and attacks Sakuya, and an inner voice tells Mahiro don't kill, if you kill you will lose your humanity, and Mahiro loses control of the broom and it begins to fade when he thinks of killing Sakuya, but he contradicts himself and says I must kill him and rushes at Sakuya with successive strikes. So Sakuya falls and says I had planned for us to finish school together. Then I would disappear quietly and the ending would be happy. Suddenly Kuro bit Mahiro on the neck and a purple aura surrounded him, and he lost control of himself, and Kuro began to swallow everything around him, and Mahiro felt he was drowning, so Sakuya tried to save him and said he wanted Mahiro to kill him, that's why he lied to him. Suddenly someone attacked Kuro and it was the Servamp of Envy, then attacked Sakuya, whom the girl pulled away with her threads, telling him it was time to retreat because they were few in number. Mahiro asked Sakuya if he wasn't going to kill him, so Sakuya threw him the bracelet and disappeared. Old Love took Misono to the hospital, and Mahiro blamed himself because he thought he caused what happened, but the Eve of the Servamp of Envy told him it wasn't his fault and introduced himself as the Eve of the Servamp of Envy, Jeej, and that he was an antiques dealer. Mahiro asked how he knew him, but Jeej talked to the doll in his hand and didn't answer Mahiro. Then Jeej hit Mahiro and asked why he hadn't fulfilled his promise. He promised to let him drink his blood after the mission ended. Mahiro said he didn't remember promising, and Jeej told Mahiro he also wanted to kill Sakuya because Sakuya wanted to die, but he was glad Mahiro realized he had no resolve. Jeej said if Mahiro wanted to know how to cancel the contract with the Servamp, he could help, and that Mahiro hadn't imagined things would reach this stage. When Mahiro lost control, the Servamp would devour him. Then Jeej left him. The next day Mahiro was sad, so Kuro asked if he wasn't going to school, but Mahiro ignored him and asked how his wounds were. Kuro said they were gone because he was a vampire. Mahiro asked if Kuro regretted taking him in, and Kuro said of course. As soon as Kuro left, Mahiro admitted to himself that he wasn't regretful but didn't know how to act or how to use his power. He prepared for school, and on the way he passed the same restaurant where Tsubaki had been and saw him eating, so he entered and sat with him. Tsubaki was surprised and told him if he wanted to ask something then ask. Mahiro asked since when Sakuya was one of his followers. Tsubaki said Mahiro knew nothing and would tell him the story. Sakuya was born to a family of liars, and the first person to lie to him was his older sister when she told him their father would return that day but not to leave his room. But he eavesdropped and didn't listen, and he learned she sacrificed herself for him and decided to die so he could live. Then his father ordered him to tell the police that she fell while they were playing or else he would kill him too. That was Sakuya's first lie. His family took a huge insurance payment from the state, but people knew that family was strange. After 6 years they forced him to kill himself too, but Tsubaki saved him and turned him into a follower because a follower is a dying human who drinks a Servamp's blood. Tsubaki asked how Mahiro could call him a friend without knowing all that. Then he laughed and mocked him, saying he would leave because Kuro scared him but he had no desire to fight, and he left. Mahiro asked himself why he hadn't tried to understand Sakuya and remembered his uncle's words telling him always make mistakes but don't regret them because his thoughts are different from everyone's and people are different but live together. He remembered Sakuya's care and how much he helped him. Then he rushed to school and asked about Sakuya. The students looked strangely, and he feared they might have forgotten him and asked if they forgot Sakuya. Ryusei said of course not, but he had transferred to another school a week ago. Then Ryusei came to Mahiro and said he had a problem. He remembered Sakuya and his personality but couldn't remember his face. He was afraid he wouldn't recognize him at the festival. Mahiro told him not to worry, he would bring him. Mahiro sent a message to Misono saying he would visit him in the hospital, but Misono told Old Love to tell him not to come. Old Love ignored and said he sent the hospital address anyway, but Misono insisted and told Old Love to tell Mahiro his injuries were minor and he shouldn't come because even after intervening to protect him, he failed and had to become stronger. The festival day came and Sakuya was there disguised, and his friends were beside him but didn't know him. Suddenly Kuro attacked, but Sakuya escaped. Mahiro told him they needed to talk, but Sakuya ran and said he couldn't because he had tried to kill Mahiro and his friend. Mahiro said he was lying because he had saved him and that he knew Misono's wounds were superficial. Sakuya said he was their enemy and their childhood memories were fake. He had only been with him this year, always lying. Mahiro said even if their friendship was just this year, he was grateful and it was a fun year with him. But Sakuya climbed the school wall and said he wasn't human, he was different, and jumped off the roof. Mahiro jumped after him, grabbed him, summoned the broom and flew, telling him it didn't matter if he wasn't human like him since Mahiro wasn't a normal human either. They fell into the forest. Sakuya joked if Mahiro's weapon helped him fly. Mahiro said in movies brooms fly, so he tried, and they laughed. Sakuya said he wished he could laugh longer but it was impossible. Tsubaki had saved and helped him and hadn't lied to him, so he couldn't betray him. Sakuya remembered when he first entered middle school for fun and met Mahiro and decided he wanted to be his friend, creating all those fake memories to be with him. Mahiro interrupted and said he would kill Tsubaki but that Sakuya wasn't alone and they were all with him, but asked him not to lie to him again. Sakuya thanked him but said he still couldn't be with him and disappeared. Mahiro told Kuro he had to kill Tsubaki to save Sakuya from him. In Tsubaki's house he was gathered with his followers, Sean with one hidden eye like a pirate, Belkia the clown, and Gilly the girl with threads, and they were playing but Sakuya wasn't joining them. Tsubaki asked Sean what he did with the mission he was given. Sean said everything happened as planned, just be reassured, and then slyly told him don't worry about anyone except the liar Sakuya. Tsubaki laughed and said his words weren't important. The main thing was to prepare for the real battle, the great festival. At school Kuro was enjoying playing with Mahiru, so Mahiru got angry and told him if people knew you were a vampire what would we do? Kuro told him not to be mad at him because he was more popular than Mahiru. Mahiru said he wasn't mad but they didn't know when another vampire might attack them. At night people were celebrating the festival and Kuro turned into his human form and enjoyed it. Sean interrupted them and said he found this metal bag and asked Mahiru if he could take it to the lost and found because he didn't know where it was but to return before the fireworks started. Mahiru decided to go alone. On the way he bumped into a strange young man with a big box. The man said he was lost from his friend and asked for help. Mahiru offered to go with him to the lost and found and call his friend on the microphones. On the way Mahiru asked what the big box was and what he used it for. The man said it was a coffin, obviously for a vampire to sleep in. Suddenly there was an explosion and people said a metal bag had exploded. Mahiru told himself he always trusted people foolishly, then told the young man he would trust him and if he deceived him he'd think what to do then. The man said he liked his way of thinking. Mahiru called Kuro and asked him to throw the bag as far as possible, but it fell again because it was heavy. The young man took it and put it in the coffin and said not to worry, nothing could destroy his coffin. The bag exploded but the coffin wasn't damaged. Mahiru asked who he was. The man said he owned a small hotel and his name was Tetsu. They heard a sound from the coffin. Tetsu opened it and told the bat inside he thought he left and was looking for him. Kuro said to the bat long time no see, child the servant of pride. As soon as the bat recovered he told Kuro he hadn't seen him in a long time since he left and traveled the world with endless trouble. Mahiru asked if it was because of Kuro. Child said he would first tell how he met Tetsu his Eve because he liked that story. Tetsu owned a hotel where Child stayed, but the room had sunlight coming in, so Tetsu decided to board up the windows completely and was very strong despite being young, so Child chose him as his Eve. Mahiru said all humans were small compared to vampires. Child said but Tetsu was 14 years old. Mahiru said when he first saw him he thought he was a college student. Child continued and pointed at the coffin saying it was a great weapon showing Tetsu's strength. Tetsu said the gloomy coffin was his weapon but he got used to it because he always cared for his guests' comfort. Even if the guest was a vampire, he would handle it and meet requests to grow his work. Child cut in and told Mahiru about today's incident. They had information about Tsubaki and his plans, so they needed to stay connected and ready for him anytime, but Tsubaki wasn't the only one to worry about. Mahiru and Kuro returned home. While waiting for the elevator Mahiru told Kuro their numbers were increasing and that would help them end Tsubaki faster. As soon as the elevator opened, someone pulled Mahiru inside. When Mahiru woke, he was kidnapped in a lab of a scientist from an organization called C3. Mahiru asked who he was. The man said he was neutral between humans and vampires but an ally to Mahiru and apologized for how he brought him here. He said he tried to contact him to unite against Tsubaki because in their labs they tried to create peace between humans and vampires, but Tsubaki threatened their plans. He hoped Mahiru and the Servant of Sloth would work with them, especially since Kuro knew them well. Mahiru asked how Kuro knew them and said he had to consult Kuro. The scientist said there was no reason to force, and they shared a common goal. Tsubaki had originally been a servant of their organization but became wild and a killer. They had to destroy him and his followers and needed Mahiru's power. Mahiru asked if they had to kill his followers. The scientist said of course they must kill them all. Mahiru refused to cooperate because one of Tsubaki's followers was his friend. The scientist said he meant Sakuya. Mahiru asked how he knew. The scientist said he had researched him and called him an arrogant child caring only for his feelings, while the scientist was important in an organization serving society and had no place for feelings. Mahiru said he didn't need to be a great scientist, he just wanted to save his friend and refused the offer. The scientist said the room they were in had 52 doors. If Mahiru could reach the exit, he could go, but he should hurry if he wanted to see his friend again. Meanwhile, the organization's elite team was chasing Kuro, who was trying to escape and avoid their attacks with difficulty. Kuro told them they must be from C3. One of them said they were the elite team and Kuro should have listened and joined them from the start but chose the harder path. Mahiru tried opening doors one after another. The scientist asked if opening every door his opponent gave him was a solution. Mahiru said sometimes the answer was outside the box and beyond big people's ideas. He summoned the broom and spun fast, creating a whirlwind that destroyed the lab walls. The scientist said unfortunately he had found the right answer but warned him not to trust the Servant of Sloth because he wasn't a friend, just a vampire like any other, killers that should be eliminated. Mahiru asked why he always wanted to destroy them and what harm there was in a vampire sitting at home watching TV or a vampire crying because he lied to you. Mahiru said he met many and saw more positives than negatives. He didn't know the organization's connection with them but to him they were friends. The scientist said to him vampires were criminals because one killed someone dear to him but he respected Mahiru's refusal. Mahiru flew away on the broom, leaving the scientist behind and searching for Kuro, who was trapped inside electric metal bars. Mahiru pulled him out and flew with him. Before the elite team could chase them, they got orders from the organization to retreat. Among the clouds Mahiru told Kuro it was natural, there was no reason to protect people but surely there was a reason to harm them. Surely Tsubaki had his reasons. Mahiru lost focus, the broom disappeared, and they fell. Kuro mocked him, saying he couldn't even control a broom but wanted to save people. After all the continuous events, Mahiru and his friends decided to relax at Tetsu's hotel, and they all tried to enjoy themselves, but Mahiru told them they didn't know what Tsubaki would do or think, so they had to be ready anytime. Mahiru and Misono talked, and Misono said they needed to gather gather information so they could catch one of Tsubaki's followers and learn his hideout and goal. Mahiru said until now he knew nothing about Tsubaki, but he also discovered from the scientist in the organization that he knew nothing about the servamps either. Maybe Tetsu had information. Misono told him not to rely on Tetsu but didn't explain why and said the two of them were enough. At dinner they all gathered, and Child came and said one of his followers provided him with information, and the information was about the appearance of a strong person in the city. Mahiru and Kuro moved to search for a huge person in black clothes with wings, and when they found him Kuro warned Mahiru that his aura showed he was very dangerous. Mahiru said but maybe he could be a lead to Tsubaki. The mysterious man had a box with a hedgehog. Mahiru asked Kuro if the hedgehog was a servamp. He felt it was asking for help. They had to follow the man to know information. Mahiru asked if Kuro didn't have followers. Kuro said he didn't need such troublemakers because followers were made when a dying human drank his blood, and he didn't know if the human wanted to live longer, and since he didn't know he avoided them. Mahiru noticed it was the first time Kuro talked about himself. Kuro told him it would be dangerous to follow someone that's strong alone. Mahiru replied he wasn't alone because Kuro was with him. He wasn't giving big help but would try. Besides Tetsu was very young and Misono was sick, so Mahiru was the most suitable for the mission. Mahiru ran to catch the man. Suddenly the man appeared above him and asked why he was chasing him and if he was human or vampire. The man struck the ground and revealed his weapon, a piano, and when he played it Kuro was tied up. He told Kuro he was a vampire and attacked him, grabbed him, flew with him and hit him fast, and Kuro couldn't resist. Kuro's wounds healed slowly. The man attacked again but Mahiru intervened and hit him, and Kuro rushed to Mahiru and drank his blood to recover strength. Mahiru told the man to free the hedgehog servamp he had trapped. The man threw the box, and the hedgehog turned into a human and said, "Do you know what most deceives people?" The devil pretending to be kind, and introduced himself as the fifth servamp of greed, lawless, and said the man was his Eve named Todoroki and 18 years old. Todoroki got angry and told him not to speak his name. Lawless said he just introduced him because he was shy. Todoroki hit him and said he hated him. Mahiru asked if he hated his partner, and Todoroki said of course, because he was good and Lawless was evil. Lawless sarcastically said, "Sure, you're the best human in Japan and I'm your evil vampire." Todoroki hit him again and told him to shut up. Mahiru told Lawless he'd be happy if he joined as an ally. Lawless replied he wasn't planning to be an ally and asked why Mahiru was even trying to make allies since he had Sleepy Ash. Their big brother could kill anyone without allies. Mahiru said he needed allies to fight Tsubaki. Lawless told Kuro they should vote like before to decide whether to kill him. Todoroki interrupted and asked who Tsubaki was. Mahiru was shocked and asked if he didn't know Tsubaki, then why attack them? Todoroki said he was just enjoying himself. Lawless said they could never work together because their thoughts were different and asked Kuro if he doubted that. Lawless said now he was with pride, arrogance, and envy. They weren't smart but surely hadn't forgotten. Mahiru cut in and asked what he was talking about, but Lawless ignored him and decided to leave. Mahiru blocked him and said they needed his help. Lawless rudely told him he could never be the Eve of Sleepy Ash and was less than ordinary. When Mahiru returned to the hotel, he accidentally discovered Todoroki was a famous piano player. He told them that person was the Eve of the servamp of greed. Child said unfortunately that boy wouldn't live long because the servamp of greed killed his Eve when bored, and he was the only servamp who did that, so it was better for them to avoid him. Mahiru decided to attend Todoroki's concert, but he didn't have a ticket to enter, so a young man named Krantz offered to get him in. Mahiru agreed and went with him. On the way to the concert, Mahiru saw from the window one of Tsubaki's followers and asked Krantz where the concert hall was. Krantz said on the first floor. Mahiru ran to the hall, afraid Tsubaki might be there targeting Todoroki or it might be a trap for him, and said to himself if there was a fight he had to join. When he reached the hall, he found corpses everywhere. Lawless told him he was very late. The first piece was over. Mahiru asked if Lawless had killed all the vampires alone. Lawless said yes, but unfortunately some escaped. Mahiru said impossible, that was overwhelming power. Todoroki cut in and told Lawless he always annoyed him. Lawless said he was just disciplining the rude audience. Todoroki attacked him but Lawless hit him. Mahiru objected and said Todoroki was just a human and could die and Lawless was beating him brutally. Lawless said if one hit could kill him then he didn't need him. Lawless asked Mahiru if he was still trying to gather allies. Mahiru said he knew Kuro was strong but they couldn't fight Tsubaki alone. Lawless said Mahiru knew nothing and came closer. Once he touched him Mahiru was thrown and hit the wall. Lawless got angry and asked if Mahiru thought he could be strong or be a hero, who he was and what he wanted exactly, how he would act in hard situations and what he planned to do. All questions Mahiru didn't know the answers to because he was a useless person pretending to be ideal. Lawless said he would always stay useless and since Mahiru didn't know anything he would tell him exactly what happened. Lawless told him in the past there were 7 servant brothers. They received a message from the C3 organization ordering them to kill a certain person and a conflict arose. They decided to settle it with a vote. Greed, gluttony, and wrath opposed. Pride, envy, and arrogance agreed. Then they felt Kuro's aura around them and his anger took over and he turned completely black. Mahiru was scared and decided not to move so he wouldn't be killed. Lawless asked Kuro if he didn't want him to continue the story, didn't want him to say what the big brother's position was, the big brother who would never feel peace. At that moment Mahiru realized the relationship between them was terribly bad. At Tsubaki's headquarters he learned that Lawless had managed to kill all his followers, so he apologized to them and cried, saying he had miscalculated, and the price was losing a big part of his family. He should have waited for Higan. In the hall Kuro attacked Lawless and Lawless counterattacked. Mahiru was afraid but told himself he had to intervene because he was the only one who could stop them. He called out to Kuro, but Kuro looked at him him with red angry eyes and told him to shut up. Suddenly Todoroki attacked Kuro and Lawless, yelling at Lawless that he always caused him trouble and ruined his concerts. Todoroki went to Mahiru, grabbed his broom, bent it, then attacked Kuro and pinned him to the wall with it. Mahiru stood in shock and asked Todoroki if that was how to use the broom, but Todoroki ignored him and told them to stop making noise and listen to his piano and cry silently. As soon as Todoroki started playing, Mahiru remembered memories of his mother and cried unconsciously, not understanding what was happening. He saw Lawless screaming Ophelia's name and crying. Lawless yelled at Todoroki to stop. Kuro's expression was terrifying as the memories chased him, but he refused to cry. Suddenly Lawless attacked Todoroki and Todoroki fought back. Then suddenly Krantz entered and ordered the creature with him shaped like a whale to stop them. The beast intervened and pushed them apart. There was a boy named Lilac who survived being killed by Lawless and had been watching the whole time, terrified. He asked himself why all this was happening and said they only wanted to repay Tsubaki, but everyone died. He saw all his dead friends and broke down. Lawless noticed him and approached to kill him, but Mahiru blocked him and said enough. Since the boy had no intention to fight, why kill him? Lawless told Mahiru not to interfere and said there was no reason to obey him, but then added he wouldn't kill the boy because he was just useless. Krantz interrupted and introduced himself, saying he was Todoroki's manager and just a normal human. His cute creature was named Gil, shaped like a whale, but inside it was Lawless's secondary follower. Krantz continued and said he would help because Mahiru loved Todoroki's music and everyone had the right to hear his playing and the whole world should hear it. Todoroki objected, saying he didn't want that, but Krantz ignored him and said his wish didn't matter. Krantz asked Mahiru what to do with the boy. Lilac panicked and begged them not to kill him. Mahiru said he wouldn't kill him but needed to consult his friends about what to do with him. Todoroki looked at Mahiru with disdain and walked away. Mahiru stopped him and asked if he could teach him to use his weapon. Todoroki coldly and contemptuously said impossible because Mahiru was just a child, then left. Mahiru decided to keep Lilac with him. On the way Mahiru noticed Kuro was still in his terrifying form, completely black and silent. Meanwhile Lawless was in his private room, angry about what happened with Kuro. Suddenly Tsubaki entered and asked if he had enjoyed the concert today. Fear showed clearly on Lawless's face. When Mahiru returned to the hotel, Misono got angry at him and asked why he always acted alone. Lawless could have killed him. Why didn't he think about the consequences of his actions? Mahiru said he hadn't expected a fight there. Misono said but there was one good thing. Mahiru succeeded in capturing one of Tsubaki's followers, but he opposed letting him stay free without supervision. They had to be careful because he might pretend to be good. Mahiru said he didn't know how to doubt people. Misono replied he wasn't asking him to doubt but to think about all possibilities. Child interrupted them and said the important thing was to start questioning him for information. They asked Lilac where Tsubaki's hideout was, and Tetsu threatened him saying he must tell the truth or he'd kill him. Before continuing, Mahiru interrupted and said he had another idea. If Tsubaki knew Lilac was here, he might come to rescue him. Misono asked sarcastically if Tsubaki would save a secondary follower. Mahiru replied when he defeated Belkia, Tsubaki came himself. Mahiru had thought he wanted Kuro, but he was saving Belkia. Also Sakuya refused to betray Tsubaki because he was grateful for his help, so surely Tsubaki wouldn't ignore Lilac. Mahiru asked if they would save their own follower if he was in danger. Misono said although Mahiru was right, it was hard to believe Tsubaki had feelings. They found Kuro had left the room, so Mahiru followed him out of the hotel and called to him, asking what was wrong. Kuro looked back with terrifying red eyes. Mahiru was scared and thought to himself Kuro had been like this since Lawless talked about the past. Did Kuro agree with whom in the vote? Should he ask or not? He had to solve the problem to get Lawless to ally with them. He gathered courage and asked what happened after the vote. Kuro's dark aura filled the place, terrifying Mahiru and making him retreat, telling Kuro they should go back to the hotel. Kuro turned into the black cat and walked quietly with him. When they returned to the hotel, Mahiru shared food with Lilac and told him not to be upset or afraid of what Misono and Tetsu said. Lilac asked why Mahiru defended him though he was an enemy and said he couldn't cooperate. Mahiru said he didn't want to fight Tsubaki, but sometimes you had to fight. Lilac said he thought that was too idealistic but he also disliked war and told Mahiru something important. Beware of Higan because he was Tsubaki's strongest follower. The next day Mahiru woke to a call from Krantz asking about Lawless and said Todoroki had called him that morning asking about Lawless because he was missing, and Todoroki's health was worsening and his body weakening. Todoroki was in the street searching for him, wondering if Lawless meant to kill him. Then he heard a voice behind him saying the one he sought was far away and unreachable. It was an older man with red hair and cold red eyes, revealed to be Higan, Tsubaki's strongest follower. Todoroki asked who he was. Higan ignored and continued, saying Tsubaki had many problems because of Todoroki's servamp, so he came to discipline him. Higan attacked and struck him, but Todoroki managed to resist. Higan asked if he would come quietly. Todoroki said in his dreams and asked who he even was. Higan said he would have to discipline him again and attacked, this time making a wound that ignited. That was his special power. The man said Todoroki couldn't win and his servamp had already been defeated by Tsubaki. Todoroki said he didn't care about the stupid hedgehog Lawless but wouldn't lose the fight. The man said his look had challenge and strength but he still would have to kill him. Then fire came from his hands and stormed the sky. Mahiru saw them from afar and told Kuro surely Todoroki was in trouble. They had to go now. Kuro said they didn't have to interfere in everything. Mahiru got angry and said they had to help Todoroki and told Kuro sharply they had to move now and wait for no one. When they arrived at the scene, Mahiru yelled at Higan asking who he was and what he wanted from Todoroki and said he must be one of Tsubaki's followers. Higan replied he was Higan and Tsubaki's most important follower, not just any. When Mahiru heard the name he told Kuro they had to kill him. Kuro turned to his human form but seemed unable to control the black aura around him and asked Mahiru for help. Suddenly the aura completely covered Kuro and trapped him in a black crystal. Mahiru was shocked and didn't understand. Higan laughed and said the servant of sloth had turned into a real ball. Mahiru tried to summon his weapon but it also disappeared. Todoroki defended him and told Higan their fight was with him. Todoroki summoned the piano. Higan said Todoroki's determination and desire entertained him even though he was an old man who had lost passion for life. He ignited flames in his hands and attacked. Todoroki played and their battle was fierce. Mahiru watched and asked himself what he had done, realizing he was weak and Todoroki was protecting him, and Kuro had been right that he lacked resolve. From within the flames Todoroki shouted to Mahiru that the solution wasn't to do what you could but to do what must be done, not to think about being a good person but about being the person you wanted to be. Suddenly Todoroki fell. Higan laughed and told him he was very strong even at his worst and without his servant nearby, that he truly entertained him but he had to complete his mission. Higan picked him up and left. Mahiru tried to stop him but when he touched Higan he froze temporarily. Higan vanished. The rest of the team arrived and asked Mahiru if Kuro was really trapped in that crystal. Child said yes because he could feel his presence. Mahiru told them Tsubaki managed to take Todoroki and he failed to help him, and Kuro was right, he should have waited for them. Misono said they still had a chance. He pulled out a phone and said he found it nearby with a picture of Tsubaki's group so they could use it to contact Tsubaki. The phone rang and it was Tsubaki calling. When they answered, Tsubaki said the phone belonged to one of his family and he'd offer a reward if they returned it. Misono suggested a deal to exchange for Lawless and Todoroki. Tsubaki laughed and said he was impressed, calling Misono surely the Eve of arrogance because it was a fantasy deal. Misono wanted the servant of greed and his Eve in exchange for the phone. Misono said no because they already had one of Tsubaki's followers and would arrange the deal and call back on the same phone. Tsubaki arrogantly told them not to call before noon because he would be sleeping and slyly added he couldn't guarantee the servant and the Eve would be together. They returned to the hotel and began planning. Misono said surely Tsubaki separated Todoroki and Lawless. If Tsubaki's 5 followers split into 2 guard teams, one must include Higan. The servant and Eve would die if apart more than 24 hours, and Lawless had been missing since midnight. They had to save them quickly. Tetsu asked if they should attack now. Misono said they didn't know Tsubaki's location. Mahiru objected, saying they had to save them fast. Misono told him he wouldn't join because he didn't know what happened to his servant and they didn't have time to fix that. Misono, Old Love, Tetsu, and Child would attack. They left him alone. Mahiru said to himself he couldn't believe he was useless at such an important time, but it was his fault because he failed to be a partner to Kuro and only relied on him for everything even though Kuro was always annoyed. He cried and told the crystal he had failed to face and help him. Kuro answered from inside the crystal asking why all the shouting. Mahiru asked what had happened to him. Kuro said he didn't know himself. Mahiru reassured him that he would handle it to bring him back because he was the only one who had to do it. Kuro said he was happy there and didn't want to face the world again. Mahiru told Tetsu and Misono what had happened and showed them the crystal, but none of them could see or hear Kuro speaking. Tetsu said the only solution was to break the crystal to free Kuro. Mahiru objected and said he had to be the one to break it himself because he must free Kuro with his own hands. Kuro yelled at him asking if that was really the problem. Mahiru ignored him and tried to break the crystal, but it didn't react. Krantz visited them at the hotel and asked about Lawless and Todoroki. Mahiru explained what happened. Krantz said he would help rescue them because he needed to ask Tsubaki how he had managed to control them. Mahiru shouted at him, saying it wasn't time for jokes. Their friends were in danger and they had to save them before midnight. They all gathered and Misono started explaining the plan. He said the most important thing was to rescue Lawless and Todoroki and to try to avoid fighting. The crucial part was to hide the hostage because he suspected Tsubaki wouldn't easily agree to exchange. In the best case, they would save their friends without giving up the hostage since they might need him for future negotiations. Mahiru argued that since they had told Tsubaki about the exchange, they had to follow through. Misono answered, fine, no need to shout, it's just a suggestion. Lilac overheard the whole conversation, terrified but thanked Mahiru for trying to help him even while worried about his own friends. Misono asked Krantz if he knew anything about vampires or could fight with them. Krantz said of course and showed his water gun designed for vampires, then suddenly sprayed Child's hand and knocked him out. Krantz innocently said he hadn't known Child was a vampire. Mahiru asked Krantz where he got vampire special tools. Krantz replied from Eve of Envy because he was a trader of strange antiques. Mahiru decided to visit him. Misono told him to forget it because that person wouldn't help. Mahiru insisted he would try since Envy and his servant might become allies. They decided to split up because there was no time. Mahiru said goodbye to Krantz and apologized for what happened, saying he knew Krantz cared deeply about Todoroki's talent but Mahiru failed to protect him. Krantz told Mahiru Todoroki's story so he would know why he cared. Todoroki had been a quiet child living in Vienna and loved the piano, teaching himself and imagining audiences crying at his music. His parents once returned from travel to enter him in a competition. That day his hair turned white from fear and he lost focus, but constant training saved him. Suddenly he played unconsciously and made everyone cry. In short, talent alone isn't everything, imagination and trying lead to success. Todoroki was ambitious, and that was why Krantz cared. He told Mahiru to always give his best and reach his goal. Then they parted. Mahiru took the train with Kuro. Suddenly Tsubaki appeared beside him as a fox, asked where the hostage was, then an explosion happened and Tsubaki vanished after realizing the hostage wasn't with Mahiru. Mahiru was confused and worried about Kuro, but Kuro said he was fine though Tsubaki was watching them. Mahiru continued searching for the antique trader. When he arrived, the door opened by itself and a voice addressed him as Mikuni. After speaking, he noticed a strange man at the door. The man invited Mahiru inside. Mahiru asked about Mikuni, Eve of Envy. The eccentric scientist said Mikuni wasn't there and asked if Mahiru was one of Mikuni's servants. Mahiru got angry and said he was just an acquaintance. The man opened a notebook, looked for Mahiru's name, then suddenly offered to add him and said, "Nice to meet you, Eve of Sloth," but forgot his name and wrote it on Mahiru's forehead to remember. He apologized, saying he quickly forgot names. Mahiru asked who he was. The man said Mahiru could consider him a mad scientist and just call him doctor. Then Mikuni entered suddenly, hit the doctor, and scolded him for letting someone in without permission. Mikuni noticed Mahiru, welcomed him, and said surely he came for something from his shop. Mahiru showed him Kuro. Mikuni was surprised by Kuro's new form. The doctor said Mahiru must visit his lab to discover the matter directly and tossed Mahiru into a mirror that turned like a door, transporting him to the lab. Meanwhile, at the hotel, Misono was explaining the plan, saying he had asked an expert to analyze the phone pictures and deduced that Tsubaki's base was in the tallest hotel in Tokyo. Surely Higen was guarding them, probably on the upper floors, though nothing was certain. Tetsu asked to rest. Misono got angry, saying he must care about the plan. Tetsu said he trusted Misono and would obey any orders. Child agreed and they left the room. Misono continued the meeting with Krantz and said he needed to study the hotel, but Tsubaki's followers knew them. Krantz answered that no one knew him. In the lab, the doctor examined Mahiru. Mahiru said he needed help for Kuro, not himself. Mikuni asked what Mahiru would do once Eve of Sloth returned. Would he try to defeat Tsubaki? Did he realize vampires didn't die? Did he know how to kill one? Mahiru said no. Mikuni explained that vampires basically don't die, but each servamp's Eve gives them two things, their name and a gift. Mahiru said he hadn't done that for Kuro, but Kuro pointed from the crystal at the bell around his neck when in cat form. Mikuni continued, saying to kill Tsubaki they must break what his Eve gave him. Mahiru said for now he just needed Kuro back. Mahiru asked the doctor why he researched vampires if he wasn't Mikuni's servant. The doctor said he went against the flow. He studied strange things and monsters with incredible power that he must discover. He wouldn't reach anything by giving up and becoming a servant. He wanted to know, search, deduce, and connect threads. Sloth was one of the greatest monsters and yet unknown, so he had to study him. Mahiru said he only wanted to help Kuro return to normal and learn to treat him well, not to exploit his power. The scientist said he didn't care about Mahiru's feelings, he just wanted to study and told him to drink tea. Mahiru drank and suddenly collapsed. The doctor said this was the best way to solve his problem, for the Eve to enter the servamp's consciousness and communicate directly. The doctor was very happy to experiment on the servamp of Sloth. At the same time, Tsubaki was angry because he couldn't find the hostage. Misono finally called after a long wait. Tsubaki decided to respond to their demands and go himself. His aide suggested going instead, but he said he trusted them yet would go personally. Meanwhile, Misono monitored the hotel to see when Tsubaki would leave. Once he did, they disguised themselves and entered the hotel. Krantz played the role of a tourist looking for a room on the upper or underground floors. He learned floors from the 43rd up were reserved, and the first 4 underground were for parking, with 1 basement level left. He booked a room on the 41st floor. Misono entered the elevator with Sakuya and feared Sakuya might know but saw no sign on his face. Once the door closed, Sakuya said the phrase, "I trust you," was just a curse and he couldn't lie anymore. He asked if Misono hadn't noticed they were going down, not up. Misono then saw the buttons had changed and Sakuya pressed 1, cutting the power. Misono ordered Tetsu to take the stairs and told him he was going down, thinking to himself he could handle Sakuya alone without help. Tsubaki arrived at the exchange point and found Gil the whale and the rest of Lawless's followers waiting. He said they must be joking with him. Gil said he knew his master was with Tsubaki, and Tsubaki realized Gil was a follower of the servamp of greed, Lawless. Gil continued that although their servamp master was just a child, they were his followers and had to help him and would do anything for him. Tsubaki said they were exaggerating, he would hand over the room keys and they should hand him his follower. But he didn't see his follower. Gil said the hostage was inside one of them. Tsubaki said he understood and had to be careful because he might kill him by mistake, but he had expected more tricks. Since his follower was here, he wouldn't leave without him. He approached Gil, grabbed him, and said the costumes were thick, so he couldn't tell if there was 1 person or 2 inside. He said it was a game, but a fun one. Misono and Sakuya had descended to the lowest floor, the 5th basement. Misono thought Gil and his friends couldn't stall Tsubaki long and they needed to rescue them quickly. He wondered whether Higen would be here or in the other team. When the door opened, the place was empty. Sakuya said his calculations were wrong. Separating Eve and servamp was wrong. Splitting into upper and lower teams was wrong. Tsubaki didn't like defense. Tsubaki liked offense. Misono realized Tsubaki had tricked him by saying he couldn't guarantee the pair would be together because the servamp and Eve were actually upstairs. Sakuya said their goal wasn't to protect the servamp of greed but to eliminate them. He attacked with his weapon, a saw, and Misono barely dodged. Misono remembered Mikuni's words, "The one who wins a battle is the most ruthless." He asked Sakuya who he was now, Mahiru's friend or Tsubaki's follower. Sakuya got angry and said Misono, Mahiru, everyone understood nothing. They didn't understand the meaning of this war. Tsubaki was searching for something but didn't know where the key was. Misono said that meant Tsubaki wasn't aiming to start a war among vampires but was seeking the key. Tetsu and Child reached the upper floor, where Higen, Belkia, and the rest of Tsubaki's followers awaited them. In a dark room, Lawless woke and asked where he was, what had happened, and where Todoroki was. Todoroki told him to shut up because he was the reason for all this. Lawless realized they were in 2 rooms but connected. Lawless asked how Todoroki would feel after he died, and no one remembered him since he was a talented pianist, but there were many others. Todoroki said he was talented and special and not easy to forget, and called Lawless stupid and dreamless, saying he would die a failed idiot. Lawless said Todoroki was naive and didn't understand life because he was just ordinary. Todoroki smashed the wall and told him to repeat that face to face. Inside Kuro's consciousness, Mahiru was surprised it was a desert but red. He met the monster in charge of Kuro's power again, who said Kuro didn't want to see him. Mahiru called that a lie and followed the bell's sound. He fell and discovered it came from underground. He wondered how to go down, imagined a square, drew it with his hand, pulled it like a rock, imagined stairs, and descended. He entered a hall containing Kuro's memories, especially the voting day. They were all gathered voting. Lawless objected, saying it wasn't reasonable to kill the one who created them. Child said the organization reported he had reappeared in Tokyo and might be creating new monsters, meaning he hadn't returned to being human and his power had greatly increased. Lawless said surely they wouldn't kill him. Child asked Sleepy Ash for his opinion. Kuro said they would kill him and he would do it himself. Lawless got angry and asked if he would kill the man who made him, their father and family. Kuro snapped and told him not to say the word family. He asked if Lawless knew why he had made them, but the memory was distorted and Mahiru couldn't hear. He focused and heard Kuro say making vampires wasn't something great. Lawless pulled away and Kuro abandoned them, deciding to kill him alone. Mahiru ran after him and shifted to another memory where Kuro headed to his creator to kill him, overwhelmed by hesitation and fear. Thorny weeds burst out and attacked Mahiru because Kuro didn't want him to know what happened, that he killed his maker. Mahiru couldn't hear their conversation and shifted to a third memory where all the servamps told Kuro he had to do it and wasn't wrong, but Lawless alone said he wouldn't forgive him. Mahiru realized Kuro needed resolve and steadiness because he had long suffered from hesitation, fear, and doubt. Mahiru said he had come to face Kuro's regret with him and wouldn't run. He reached the place holding all of Kuro's secrets. The monster said Mahiru could see more memories and this time he would give him a stronger weapon to break the lock on the box containing Kuro. Mahiru said he didn't need weapons. He needed Kuro to accept his presence by himself. He knocked on the door. Kuro asked who he was. Mahiru froze, not knowing what to say, then saw his reflection and the name the doctor had written on his forehead. He calmed down and bravely said he was Mahiru, here to help and face him. The door opened. Inside, Mahiru found Kuro trapped in his regret, hearing him ask why he did that. They didn't need more monsters, but the maker had created him. Should he have convinced them first? Had the world changed for the better after his decision? Was killing the only choice? Was he wrong or right? Regret was harsh. He wouldn't decide anything again because he didn't want to feel it again. Then he screamed loudly, saying he hadn't been wrong, begging anyone to confirm it. Mahiru reached Kuro and told him he was wrong because he alone had to decide if he was wrong or right. He alone decided. The place began to shatter and vanish. Mahiru struck Kuro and told him if he regretted once, he shouldn't repeat it. He had to return with Mahiru and face himself. In the dark room of the hotel, Todoroki told Lawless he didn't care that he was an eternal being because he could kill him right there. Lawless remembered his previous Eve and that he killed her himself after admiring Todoroki's character. He told Todoroki he should kill him just like the ones before and broke the threads binding him. He told Todoroki he thought he was great, but he was just insignificant. Todoroki told him to talk about himself. Lawless drew his sword and said they would know now. He attacked, but Todoroki dodged and even struck him. Lawless realized Todoroki could defend himself with difficulty and noticed his own wounds were healing slowly, though Todoroki's condition should be worse. Todoroki kicked Lawless in the face and broke his glasses. Lawless told him to stop. He had been trying to teach him something about life, that they were all hated in society. Todoroki said not all were hated, just Lawless. On stage, he said meaningless, boring words, and nothing would give him value except effort in trying to achieve something. Lawless always spoke about excellence but was a failure with no right to discuss it. Todoroki attacked again. Lawless turned into a beast and asked who he thought he was, saying he knew nothing. He drew Todoroki into his memories. Thousands of years ago in a distant land, Princess Ophelia played happily with children as Lawless watched with joy. He accompanied her in the palace and outside, took her to places far from the city and above the clouds, and they were blissfully happy. One day she told him her marriage had been arranged. Her groom was a prince of a neighboring country, and their union would bring peace. He begged her to run away and not marry, to escape and live happily with him. She said she didn't want freedom. He trembled, asking what she wanted so he could grant it. She said all she wished was peace between the nations. Lawless stayed silent, not opposing her. She added that after marriage she'd have to hide him but could take him as her pet. Lawless stood stunned, speechless. After marriage, peace was brief because her nation broke the treaty. Her husband's nation decided to kill her in response. Lawless rushed to her, urging escape because they planned her death. She refused to leave. He begged her once to listen, promising protection if they ran. She laughed, saying it was the second time he'd asked her to run, but she didn't want freedom or life. Her goal was peace even at the cost of her life. She said she was a fitting Eve for greed and begged him not to stop her only wish. He wept. She wiped his tears, saying as a vampire he had to be stronger. He said he was strong enough to destroy both nations to save her. She said he wouldn't because that would rob her of her desire. He protested but broke down crying. She wept too and thanked him for being there, for being her Romeo. They shifted to another memory, the princess before the people declaring she hoped her sacrifice would be told for generations, that her stance wouldn't be forgotten, and she died for peace not from weakness but choice. She told them not to sink into sorrow but to plant olive trees for peace. Another memory hundreds of years later, children visited the statue of the Peace Princess and found the hedgehog people said had protected it, never leaving. Lawless said she fulfilled her wish and achieved peace, but since then he had done nothing but cry. One day Child visited, left him a message from the organization, and asked him to return because Sleepy Ash needed them. Then came the memory where Lawless asked Kuro if they would kill their creator, questioning if that was peace. Kuro replied his decision didn't mean hate. Lawless said Kuro tried to convince himself their father's death was sacrifice for peace. Kuro ignored him and decided to kill alone. Lawless returned to the distant land only to find peace gone, the United Nations destroyed by a third, and the statue demolished. He broke down hugging the ruins, telling Ophelia not to worry because he wasn't sad, since everyone was hated, lives were meaningless, and everything was a worthless play as the curtain fell. Todoroki called him stupid, failed, and hated too. He stepped on stage saying Lawless's role was to listen. Lawless asked for a joyful tune. Todoroki said he didn't choose what Lawless heard, he heard his own feelings. He played Für Elise by Beethoven. Lawless said he hated it, too sad. Todoroki said the song wasn't sad, but Lawless was. He became what he imagined. Lawless cried, imagined her, and said he wanted never to leave her, to protect her, to say he loved her, to turn back time and never part, maybe find another way to peace. He awakened and told Todoroki he wouldn't let him die there. He still wanted to hear his music. He needed to ask Sleepy Ash what he had thought back then, and he must tell Ophelia, wherever she was, that he loved her. They emerged from Lawless's mind, united, and destroyed the room. Higan awaited them, saying he knew they would come out. He mocked Todoroki, apologizing but saying he'd defeat him again. Lawless said Todoroki's enemy was his enemy and this time he would kill him himself. Todoroki told them he would kill him. Lawless shouted that Todoroki could barely stand. Todoroki got angry and asked if he was mocking him. Lawless replied he was just worried because he looked dead. Higgins said maybe they should let him join and ignited the room with fire, asking who would go first. Lawless told him he wasn't planning to play with him. Todoroki attacked, but as soon as he approached, he vanished and Lawless appeared instead. Todoroki had tricked him and struck from behind, smashing Higan into the wall and destroying it. But Higan resisted and rose again. They attacked once more. Higan thought if he tried to block Todoroki's strike, he might get tricked again by the position swap with Lawless, and if he didn't defend, Todoroki might not swap. But Higan was also a vampire. He slashed Todoroki lightly, and Todoroki reminded him he forgot to ignite it. Then flames filled the room. Todoroki said he reminded him of when he was an artist and the world was his canvas, and now he'd paint them his way. In the lower level, Misono asked Sakuya why he was revealing so much. Sakuya answered he was buying time. Misono couldn't know what part was false anyway. He apologized, saying he needed to delay him. Sakuya added that Misono must think he's just a servant who can't defeat a servamp, but if he destroyed the gift to the servamp, he could kill it, and he glanced at the necklace around Old Love. He bit his hand, summoned his sword mixed with Tsubaki's power, and attacked Old Love. Suddenly Mikuni attacked Sakuya. Misono asked why he was there. Mikuni replied asking if he didn't want to go up to the others. Misono said he didn't need his help and went up. Old Love told him not to hate Mikuni because he wasn't that bad, but Misono ignored it. When Misono reached Tetsu, he asked about Child. Tetsu said Belkia managed to hide him with a magical trick. Misono shouted at Belkia, asking where Child was. Belkia replied the trick wouldn't be fun if revealed, but the real issue was what would happen next since they had no strong servamp with them. Misono asked Tetsu if Higan was there. Tetsu said he had been but went up to Lawless. Misono realized Tsubaki had planned everything and they had fallen into his trap. He wondered what the next step should be. Retreat maybe. Tetsu interrupted asking what he should do now. Misono felt helpless. Suddenly Mahiru burst in riding a huge terrifying black lion, shattering the entire floor. He apologized for being late. They all gathered on the upper floor. Mahiru asked if everyone was okay. Misono said Child disappeared. Mahiru confidently said let's go bring him back. Belkia mocked him for being arrogant. Mahiru summoned his weapon, but this time it was a spear. He attacked the thread girl and defeated her. Belkia attacked, but Kuro spread his wings and split Belkia in half. Above, Higan had defeated Lawless and Todoroki. He said he needed to go down because they wouldn't beat the black lion. Lawless weakly said Kuro returned. He hadn't thought he'd see him like that again. Everyone had changed except him. He tried to attack Higan but got struck and was told he was just a child compared to Higan. Higan said he could let Todoroki live if Lawless begged. Todoroki shouted to shut up, that only he could beg Lawless. Higan laughed and said he was joking. He had killed and tortured many, everything felt empty, but now he fulfilled Tsubaki's desire and painted his art. He said self-sacrifice was the most beautiful art. Todoroki told him what he did was worthless and nothing to celebrate. Todoroki said his only wish was to kill him and attacked, drawing on Higan's arm and dragging him into the piano world. He told him not to tie himself to someone else's desire or he would lose. He summoned the piano and started playing, uniting with Lawless. Lawless imagined himself on stage, taking Higan there, telling him he dreamed of helping others but no one would save him now and his fire wouldn't work on that stage. The stage turned into a duel hall. Higan attacked with his sword. Lawless blocked and turned his blade into many swords that pierced Higan. Lawless laughed and reminded him he forgot he was a hedgehog. Lawless asked Todoroki if he was okay. Todoroki said of course. Lawless said in the past he could have fought for his dreams and probably won. Todoroki said thinking about the past was stupid but now now was the time to fight. Lawless told him he was amazing. Mahiro entered and asked if they were fine. Todoroki said Mahiro must have come to hear his piano. Mahiro replied he came to save him and this time wouldn't fail. Todoroki said he came late but seemed close to success. They all gathered. Misono said they were okay and saved Lawless and Todoroki but lost child. Mahiro asked about Lilac. Tetsu pulled him from the coffin and they realized the one with Gil was fake. Mahiro told Kuro he needed to talk to Lawless. Kuro agreed, though annoyed. Kuro went to Lawless and thanked him for not forgiving him because it helped him face his regret in return. Lawless blushed and said Mahiro should be angry but he was glad he came back. Lawless then addressed Mahiro, thanking him. Mahiro asked Lawless's real name since he had killed all his Eves. Lawless said he might kill Todoroki so just call him Lawless. Kuro called him shy and cowardly. Lawless said his name was Hyde and showed the gift from Todoroki, a chain engraved with Hyde. Suddenly Lilac attacked, snatched the chain, and said Hyde must be punished for killing all his friends. Mahiro angrily told him to stop. Lilac apologized, said he was grateful but also loved his friends and memories, and now he would kill one of Mahiro's friends so Hyde had the right to kill him. Suddenly Tsubaki appeared and asked Lilac if he was the hostage he'd been looking for, apologizing for being late. He asked for the chain. Lilac gave it to him. Tsubaki told them he noticed they defeated Higan. Tetsu asked where Child was. Tsubaki laughed, saying Belkia's tricks always amazed him and had allowed moving whatever was in the box elsewhere, and that was how he relocated Child to the meeting place. Mahiro cut him off and asked what he wanted to do. Tsubaki replied he wanted to fulfill his master's dream. Before dying, his master wished to clean the trash he had created. He pulled Mahiro into his consciousness. At first Mahiro thought it was blood but then saw it was red wisteria. Tsubaki said he was the tool his master built to end chaos, the tool able to kill servamps. He could kill them because things like bonds and trust meant nothing to him as the servamp of melancholy. Suddenly he grabbed Lawless's chain and broke it, injuring Lawless. Fog filled everything and Kuro attacked Tsubaki with his sword. Tsubaki told him to back off because he wouldn't be able to kill him but would cut off his head and let it fall like autumn leaves. He asked if Kuro would acknowledge him now as their brother. Kuro said sadly he already acknowledged him because only their master could create something so dirty. Tsubaki said that was because the master was great and Kuro had killed him in front of him, but he needed to know what the master told Kuro before dying. Kuro said they hadn't spoken then. Tsubaki grew angry and said since his creation, the master only met Kuro and then Kuro killed him. He asked if Kuro had never been told about him. Kuro must not have listened because the master had depended on him. Kuro asked why the master depended on Tsubaki and why he was made. Tsubaki asked why Kuro never questioned it. Kuro admitted he had been wrong and needed to fix his mistake. He wanted to face Tsubaki but not with weapons, they could face each other with words. Tsubaki attacked with his sword and said sadly their principles differed and Kuro killed the master without discussion, so kill him the same way. Kuro replied he regretted the first time and didn't want to regret again, he was trying to change. Tsubaki struck and mocked his words as weak and late regret. Tsubaki said no one understood him, that's why he was alone. People could only save themselves by rejecting others, and crumbling values destroyed the world. He asked Kuro if they should destroy it. He rose to the sky, gathered power, and unleashed a red explosion that covered everything, raining deadly swords. People tried to run. Tsubaki returned to the ground and slashed at Kuro. Kuro destroyed the blades, furious, and said he still had things to say. He grabbed Tsubaki's clothes and said he would oppose him even if forced to kill him. Tsubaki stabbed Kuro's chest. Kuro, struggling, said he had to speak about what happened then. Tsubaki asked why the master never introduced him. Mahiro had ordered everyone to evacuate and was searching for Kuro. Mikuni asked why he didn't escape. Mahiro said he had to reach Kuro. Mikuni warned Kuro didn't need his strength. This was a servant battle that ended with one dying. Mahiro replied Kuro was trying to change that and faced Tsubaki differently. Mikuni objected, saying if Kuro chose to handle his issues, Mahiro shouldn't interfere. Mahiro asked what good was an Eve now if he didn't step in. He kept searching. Tsubaki kept striking Kuro brutally. Kuro didn't defend. Tsubaki drew his sword to finish him but Mahiro blocked the blow. Tsubaki lunged at Mahiro and Kuro lost control, transforming into the Black Lion. The building started collapsing. C3 scientists rushed to help people escape. Tetsu found Child with them in an ambulance. On top, Kuro attacked Tsubaki and pinned him underfoot, asking if he killed their master that way. Kuro grew angrier but Mahiro told him to calm down. Tsubaki seized the chance and aimed his sword at Mahiro, but suddenly Sakuya appeared and shielded Mahiro. Tsubaki was shocked. Sakuya said even as Tsubaki's follower he couldn't take sides anymore. Kuro attacked again. Suddenly Tsubaki's chest split, revealing a keyhole. They realized Mahiro's weapon wasn't a spear but a key. Mahiro inserted it and entered Tsubaki's mind. There were memories with his master, who always told Tsubaki his power was greater than his siblings. Tsubaki wondered if they would accept him as brother or visit him, but despite them existing, the master kept creating until the Black Lion killed him. Then Tsubaki decided he must fulfill his master's wish and kill them, gathering followers and saving them for years. Tsubaki asked Mahiro if he could see him and believe in him. He drew his sword to attack, but Kuro in human form pulled Mahiro back to reality and fought Tsubaki. Kuro asked Mahiro to stay back, but Mahiro fought with him, saying people kept claiming someone else must act because they chose comfort. But the world existed thanks to those who sacrificed and were brave. Mahiro said he wanted to be that person, and he and Kuro had decided together, so they'd keep going. Kuro said Mahiro was the most annoying human. They attacked Tsubaki together. Mahiro then embraced Tsubaki and told him he saw him, believed in him, and accepted his existence. months. Suddenly Tsubaki's shock turned the sky blue again. Tsubaki decided to heal Sakuya and told him to inform the remaining followers they were free to live on and forget him, as the rest was his burden alone. Everything returned to normal. Tetsu and Child went back to the hotel. Todoroki and Lawless returned home. Tsubaki's followers were arrested for a while. Mahiru went back to high school and offered Kuro the food he liked, saying it didn't matter if it was expensive. Kuro told him he was the most annoying